I wasn't expecting it, actually. I wasn't expecting to be invited to this place and reflect on the issue, which to a certain extent people sort of more and more know me about, actually. The issue of privatization. People think that, many people say that I'm communist, I'm a Marxist, because I do not really support privatization. I'm just saying that, in any case, there's nothing wrong with being Marxist, actually. To start with. But in any case, what I wanted to say first, actually, on this issue is everything, there is a tendency, not only a tendency, but there's been a narrative that has been very much actually pushed upon us that everything business does is good and everything public is not really that good, actually. And I do not really subscribe to that. I am not really saying that privatization is not really something that we shouldn't really discuss or we shouldn't really adopt, but I'm saying that there are certain things that can be privatized, but there are also certain things that can remain in the public domain. I mean, this is a starting point, and then we can discuss it, how, why, and so on and so forth. I think when we reflect actually about the tendency of privatization today, we associate it with the neoliberalism actually concept. It's very difficult actually to say whether that is a concept, an ideology, a doctrine, a set of ideas. But one thing is sure, it goes beyond the domain of economics. It touches upon cultural, it touches upon social issues. Basically what it does in the area of economics, which would be perhaps the main area of focus for me, is that it favors the rule of the market, actually. The market comes first above everything else, about the human, above everything else. There's no control, price control, there's no social issues, concerns. The private enterprise is given actually free hand to do whatever it wants to do. I mean, this is actually the logic behind the one of the neoliberal demands, actually. The second one is there's no room for social services. I mean, it doesn't really, I mean, again, there are some differences actually depending on whose approach you sort of look into, but basically the neoliberalism actually doesn't really favor education, healthcare, safety net for the poor, and even the maintenance of roads, bridges, water. All these actually are not really the domain of the neoliberals. The third point is deregulation, actually. There, it sort of subscribes to reducing government regulations of everything, basically, that could diminish profits. As long as it affects profit, then deregulations has to take precedence. Privatization comes next, perhaps. And here is perhaps the topic of our discussion. State-owned enterprises, goods and services have to be transferred to private investors, actually. And the way to transfer it, of course, there are various ways. It can be outright sales, subcontracting. It can be via deregulations. It can be not doing anything, for example, in the sense of, if you take, for example, the education sector, there is a demand, a public demand, actually, for the education sector to grow, but the government can choose not to spend resources and let the private sector come in actually and supposedly take over actually that empty space. But basically actually the privatization is pushed because of gains in supposedly efficiency. Why do we privatize? Actually, one of the arguments is, as I said earlier, the private sector is better suited actually to do this work than the public sector. And yet you can find quite a few examples around the world actually that where the public actually sector has done quite well actually. In terms of countries, we can mention, for example, France, we can mention Malaysia over the 1970s actually, before they start privatizing. In fact, the France case was very glaring because they had one of the most successful, effective public sector. But even if today you look at the Scandinavian countries, you tend to see that quite a few, for example, a large percentage, at least up to 30%, even more, in countries like Norway that are basically public assets and owned by public, by the public sector. Finally, actually, in this, we can also mention the concept of eliminating the public good or community and replacing it with individual responsibility. Pressuring, for example, the poorest people in a society to find solution to their own problems, actually. So what it does is, okay, you're an individual, try to solve your own problem. The government is not there actually to solve your problem. I mean, this is basically the contour of the neoliberalism. And there, the topic of today, when it comes to privatization, and when it comes again to Ethiopia's privatization, you sort of say, so why do we privatize actually some of the assets that can be considered strategic, that can be considered actually assets that can generate another space for development. It could be, for example, the one area that I've always been against is the privatization, for example, of the Ethio Telecom. I'm not even mentioning Ethiopian Airlines because that is another case. And earlier, Attorney Christos actually explained it quite well in one sentence. Actually, the input of Ethiopian Airlines actually to the country's foreign exchange actually. To the countries sustaining its foreign exchange. So when it comes to Ethiopian Telecom, the argument, of course, is again the argument of efficiency. And there's a question: is it really an argument that can really tilt the balance? And you look around countries all over, and you find there's no case for it. The fact that Ethio Telecom is left to operate the way it operates today, and the fact that Ethiopian Airlines is left or is pushed to operate the way it operates today, it's made by choice. It's the government choice to let actually Ethiopian Airlines to be a competitive company, an internationally competitive company, to operate in that fashion, to put all the structure that are necessary actually for it to operate in that fashion. It's a choice. For Ethio Telecom, we chose another model actually. So the first question is, if it is efficiency, I think we need really to look whether this is really a real efficiency question. The second argument is, we need to pay. We need to sort of look into our foreign debts and by putting it on the market actually and getting money out of it, and then we can reduce our debts. And again, that's earlier discussed. The issue of foreign debt, particularly the Ethiopian foreign debt, doesn't really necessarily push Ethiopia to sell its gold actually aspect. I mean, it's like you don't have anything, then you sort of go and try to find what you have in the house and then sell it actually to sell your debt. Because yes, paying debt is very important, and you will always have to pay debt unless, as someone said, it's cancelled. And the cancellation of debt is not really something new, as it was said earlier. It happened actually throughout centuries, actually, even before the advent of Christianity. So if it is not debt, if it is not efficiency, so you sort of say, what is it then? Is it corruption maybe? One gains something out of it actually because you are in a position to do that actually? This is a question, this is a valid question. Or is it again an ideological issue? Because we have chosen actually a path that favors market, and privatization is one area that needs to be implemented. So there are a number of issues actually that one has to put forward to find out actually and to determine why the Ethio Telecom, why the rush in fact also, not just the decision to sell it, but why the rush actually? Why not really sort of think it out actually and try to find something that would accommodate everybody actually on this issue? Because in the end, there is a confusion earlier, and I think I seem to detect that when something is privatized, there is a tendency to feel that there is transparency. In fact, that's not really the case. It can't be. When something is private, there's no access to it. It's closed. It's not for you to see how things are done. When something is public, it's for everybody actually to sort of come and ask, use, take advantage of it because it's public. And I think the major difficulty and the major sort of issue that why public assets or public companies are not doing well, supposedly, as a private sector, because the public companies are made to operate with a minimum, actually, service provision plans. A minimum. A minimum that can sort of provide services to the poor, as well as to the middle class and the rich. But the problem is, if you want to sort of a better service, then someone has to pay. And the middle class is not really willing to pay. The rich are certainly not willing to pay. And so the minimum services that is provided by the public companies are always open for criticism. And that is something that when we sort of look at the public-private actually issues, one has to sort of also take into account this part of it. I think I would probably say one or two things, and then I would sort of the issue of privatization, when we speak of privatization in France or in England or in any of these developed countries, it's basically a national policy issue. It's like the money would circulate around in those countries. When it comes to countries like Ethiopia, like many African countries, we're talking about foreign investors actually coming in. We're talking about denationalizing the assets. We're talking about leaving these assets to someone, to some entity that we will never know who the owners are. So that is one thing that we need also to take into account. Do we want actually to sort of lose our sovereignty? It's a question of sovereignty. So I think I have touched upon actually some of the major issues that I wanted actually, to present to you. So maybe in the next round, with the question and answer, maybe I can clarify, or maybe I can learn something also from you on this issue. Thank you very much.